How to truly love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. There is no higher calling, no greater purpose, and no deeper fulfillment than to truly love God with all that you are. Yet for many, these words, with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, remain a poetic ideal rather than a living reality, but this command is not symbolic. It is a spiritual law, and within it lies the secret to unlocking a life of power, peace, and divine union. To love God fully is not to perform rituals or recite praises while your inner world remains fragmented. To love God fully is to make him your entire consciousness, to surrender every thought, emotion, and desire to the awareness of his indwelling presence. It is not a duty of religion, but a transformation of being. God is not somewhere else, distant and demanding your affection. God is the essence of your being, the I am within you, the unconditioned awareness from which all life flows. To love him is to recognize him in yourself as yourself. It is to give your entire attention to what is real, what is eternal, what is already within. This kind of love is not emotionalism, but alignment. It is not passive belief, but living truth. It is the death of the false self and the resurrection of the divine self. It requires the full engagement of your heart, your imagination, your intellect, and your will. It asks you to turn inward, to feel after him, and to find that he has never been absent. This is not just about loving God in theory. It is about experiencing him as your life, your being, your source. It is about choosing moment by moment to abide in him by abiding in the state of love, faith, and creative power. That is how you love God with your whole being, and when you do, the world around you begins to conform to the world within. So, let us now explore what it means to love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength, not from the outside in, but from the inside out, for to know this love is to know freedom. And to live it is to walk in heaven, here and now. God dwells within. To love God is to love the divine within yourself. To truly love God with all your heart begins with a revelation. God is not outside of you. God is not a distant being watching from the heavens, nor is he an impersonal force removed from your experience. He is the very breath within your lungs, the awareness behind your eyes, the silent, eternal presence within your consciousness. He is not a separate entity you must chase, impress, or appease. He is your own I am, the self, existent being that animates all things. Until this truth becomes real to you, love for God will remain external and partial. But when you know that the very life within you is God, your love becomes whole, personal, and consuming. The command to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength is not a call to strive harder with your human effort. It is a call to awaken. It is the divine invitation to remember who you are at your core. Your heart beats with divine intelligence. Your soul is the spark of God. Your mind is the creative power through which his will is expressed. Your strength is not yours. It is his power in action through you. When you recognize this, loving God is no longer an effort. It is your natural state. It is the magnetic pull back into union with the source of all things. But why do so few experience this kind of love? Because they search for God where he is not. They look for him in the stars, in temples built with hands, in the approval of others, or in religious performance. But God can only be found where he dwells, within. You must go inward into the stillness of your being, and there you will hear his voice. There you will feel his presence. There you will recognize that the one you have sought is the one who has been seeking you, through your own longing. To love God with all your heart means to give the deepest part of yourself to him, without condition, reservation, or fear. It is to make him the treasure of your life. Your heart is the seat of desire, and whatever has the throne of your desire is what you love most. Do not be deceived by words or outward confessions. Your true love is revealed by what you dwell on, what you pursue, and what you prioritize. If your heart is constantly troubled by lack, fear, or resentment, then your heart is not yet fixed on God. To love God with all your heart is to make his presence, his peace, his truth your primary desire. This is not about emotional feelings. Emotions fluctuate. True love is deeper than passing moods. It is commitment. It is focus. It is devotion. It is the decision to dwell in the awareness of his presence, even when your senses scream otherwise. It is to abide in faith when circumstances look bleak. It is to believe in the unseen when the visible contradicts it. When you do this, you are loving God with your whole heart, because you are placing your trust in Him as the only reality. You cannot love what you do not know, and so to love God you must know Him, not through doctrine, but through experience. And to experience Him you must go within. The outer world is but a shadow of the inner realm. Everything visible began as invisible thought. The unseen is the source. God is the unseen essence of life, the root from which the tree grows. If you try to love Him from the outside, you will find frustration. But if you turn inward, even for a moment, and become still, you will feel Him. He is always there, always waiting, always speaking, not with words, but with presence. And His presence is love. When you discover God within, you begin to see yourself differently. No longer are you merely human, weak and wandering. You are divine in origin, eternal in nature. You begin to see that to love God is also to love yourself, not the self that is built by ego and memory, but the self that is eternal, powerful, and free. This is not arrogance, it is the deepest humility. Because when you realize God dwells in you, you also realize He dwells in everyone, and so your love for Him expands. You begin to treat others not as mere people, but as temples of the Most High. Your love for God becomes love for all. The separation dissolves. That is the beginning of true transformation. This divine indwelling is not metaphor. It is literal spiritual truth. The very I am within you is God's name. When Moses asked, "What is your name?" the voice replied, "I am that I am." This is not a phrase to memorize. It is an identity to realize. Every time you say, "I am," you are invoking the name of God. What follows that statement reveals who you believe yourself to be. When you say, "I am tired," "I am poor," "I am unworthy," you are misusing the name of God. To love God is to honor His name in truth. Say instead, "I am loved," "I am powerful," "I am whole," and you begin to align with His nature. This alignment is not merely personal, it is creative. Whatever you accept as true of your I am, you give life to. This is the great mystery of faith. It is also the greatest form of love. When you agree with God's truth about you, when you say yes to His image in you, you honor Him fully. You are loving Him with your whole being, because you are no longer at war with His vision for your life. So many cry out, "God, show me that you love me," not realizing He already has, by choosing to live within them. His love is not proven by what He gives externally, but by the treasure He has hidden within you. You are the ark of His presence, the house of His Spirit, the echo of His thought, and when you discover this, loving Him becomes as natural as breathing. It is no longer a command, it is your joy. Let this be your prayer: "God, let me see you where you truly are, in me." Let this be your devotion, to treat every thought, every emotion, every reaction as a doorway to deeper union with Him. Guard your inner life. Choose only those thoughts that honor His presence. Speak only words that affirm His love. Think only of yourself what He thinks of you. That is how you love Him with all your heart. The moment you begin to recognize God as your very own life, you will also begin to see life differently. You will not chase blessings. You will realize you are the blessing. You will not strive for favor. You will realize you are already favored. You will stop looking for signs and become one, because the greatest sign that God is real is a person who knows He lives within. To love God with all your heart, then, is not about trying harder. It is about awakening deeper. It is about remembering who you are and choosing to live from that sacred awareness. When the heart is fixed on this truth, it cannot help but overflow with love. And from that place, all things are possible. Imagination is the gateway to union with God. Approximately 1,200 words in paragraphs, written in the style of Neville Goddard without mentioning him. Imagination is not mere fantasy. It is not daydreaming or idle thought. Imagination is the sacred faculty through which the divine reveals itself. It is the gateway, the holy of holies within the human soul, where man communes with God. When you are commanded to love God with all your mind, it is not a command to intellectualism. It is not a call to religious study alone. It is an invitation to bring the full power of your imagination into union with divine truth. For imagination is the creative power of the mind, and it is in that power that the image and likeness of God is found. To love God with all your mind is to consecrate the power of imagination. It is to understand that your mind is not a chaotic field of random thoughts, but the womb of creation. Everything that appears in the outer world begins in the mind's inner chambers. Your imagination is not something to be suppressed or dismissed. It is to be redeemed and used rightly. When imagination is aligned with truth, it becomes the ladder between heaven and earth, spirit and form, God and man. Every great act of faith is an act of imagination. Every healing, every transformation, every answered prayer begins first as an inner vision. Before Abraham became the father of many nations, he had to imagine himself so. Before David defeated Goliath, he had already seen the victory in his heart. Before the walls of Jericho fell, they marched in silence with inner knowing. This is the hidden pattern. The outer world responds to the inner state. What you see, feel, and accept as true in your imagination becomes the substance of your world. This is why imagination is sacred. It is the altar on which you either sacrifice your fear or magnify your faith. When you imagine failure, loss, fear, or rejection, you are misusing the power of your mind and aligning it against God's nature. But when you imagine love, abundance, wholeness, and victory, you are giving your imagination over to divine use. That is true worship, when your inner world reflects the truth of God's heart. So many say they love God, yet they imagine sickness, they imagine poverty, they imagine betrayal, they imagine lack. How can this be? You cannot serve two masters. You cannot say you love God and yet dwell in inner images that contradict his nature. God is life, health, love, abundance, peace. To love him with all your mind is to surrender every false image, every fearful projection, every unworthy thought, and to fill the temple of your imagination with truth. What you dwell on in imagination, you are worshipping. Let that truth awaken you. The mind is not the enemy. It is the instrument. When used without awareness, it runs wild with fear and repetition. But when brought under spiritual discipline, the mind becomes the garden of God. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he, not as he says, not as he hopes, but as he thinks and imagines persistently. You can say, God is my provider, yet still see yourself as needy in your imagination, and that inner image will dominate your life. To love God with your mind is to see what he sees, think what he thinks, and imagine what he has promised as already yours. Imagination is the bridge from desire to fulfillment. The world of senses is slow, shaped by time, but the inner world of imagination is instant, flexible, divine. To live by imagination is not to ignore the world, but to reshape it from a higher law. When you dwell in the end, when you imagine the outcome you desire as already real, you are loving God with your mind, because you are trusting that what is unseen is more powerful than what is seen. You were created to imagine. You cannot stop imagining. Even your worries are distorted forms of imagination. The problem is not that people imagine, it is that they imagine without intention. To love God with all your mind is to discipline this creative faculty and to make it the dwelling place of divine truth. Do not let the world program your imagination. Guard it, shape it, fill it with the word, the vision, the reality of God. That is your spiritual responsibility. When you sit quietly and imagine yourself whole, healed, free, and at peace, you are not lying to yourself. You are aligning with the higher truth of your being. You are communing with God. That moment of inward visualization, when it is felt with conviction, is more powerful than hours of begging in prayer. For in that moment you have touched the realm where God operates, not in time, but in eternity. And from that point of inner union, the outer world must eventually conform. Consider this: when a person falls in love, they begin to think only of their beloved. Their thoughts are consumed with the object of their affection. They imagine moments together, they rehearse words in their minds, they dream of the future. In the same way, to love God with your mind is to let your imagination be consumed with him, his truth, his promises, his presence. The more you dwell on him, the more you become like him. What you consistently imagine, you eventually express, but this requires awareness. Most people live reactively. Their imagination is dictated by what they see, what they hear, and what others say. But to love God with your mind is to live intentionally. It is to choose your inner state regardless of the outer. It is to wake up and say, today, I will dwell only in truth. I will imagine only what is aligned with God's nature in me. I will not allow fear to shape my mind. I will not let the past write my future. I will dwell in the end. I will assume the wish fulfilled. I will see with the eyes of faith. This is not delusion. It is divine participation. You are not ignoring reality. You are creating it. The world may call it denial, but heaven calls it faith. When you imagine what God has promised as already yours, you are not being naive. You are exercising your divine inheritance. You are shaping substance with thought. You are walking by faith, not by sight, and that is the essence of spiritual power. Let no one convince you that imagination is weakness. It is the highest expression of your divinity. Even God, when creating the world, first imagined. The earth was formless, and he said, "Let there be." He spoke what he saw within, and it became what we now see without. You are made in his image. You too must speak what you see within. That is how creation continues. So ask yourself daily, what am I imagining? What story am I telling in the theater of my mind? What future am I rehearsing? What self am I envisioning? Because that is what you are loving. That is what you are serving. That is what you are becoming. If your imagination is filled with limitation, you are loving fear. If it is filled with possibility, healing, and divine promise, then you are loving God. Train your mind to be the temple of truth. When a negative image arises, replace it. When a fear-based vision attempts to take root, uproot it. When your imagination begins to dwell in lack, bring it back to abundance. This is the real spiritual battle, not against flesh and blood, but against false imaginations. Cast them down and lift up the truth. The more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. Soon your dominant thoughts, your resting imagination, will dwell in love, peace, joy, and confidence. And from that inner atmosphere, miracles will begin to manifest, not because you begged for them, but because you became aligned with the source from which they flow. Imagination, when filled with faith, is prophecy. It is the seed of manifestation. It is prayer without words. To love God with all your mind is to honor this gift, to master it, and to let it be the canvas on which heaven paints your destiny. So today, choose to imagine rightly. Choose to dwell in the end. Choose to see yourself as already healed, already provided for, already chosen, already free. Let your mind be the mirror of God's glory. That is how you love him, not with scattered thoughts, but with focused vision. For the mind set on him is peace, and from that peace flows every good thing. Wholehearted devotion requires the death of the old self, approximately 1,200 words, written in the style of Neville Goddard without mentioning him. To love God with all your soul is not a passive experience. It is not a surface-level affection or a mere emotional impulse. It is a total surrender, a radical reorientation of your inner being toward the divine center. Loving God with all your soul demands the death of who you were, so that who you truly are in him may rise. It is not an addition to your life. It is a transformation of life itself. The soul cannot serve two masters. It cannot cling to the old identity and fully embrace the divine. The price of total devotion is total surrender. Many speak of loving God, but few realize what such love requires. It is not sentiment. It is sacrifice. It is not occasional. It is complete. To love God with all your soul is to die daily to the false self, the self formed by fear, by memory, by the opinions of others, by the illusions of separation. This self must fall. It must dissolve in the light of truth so that the soul may be free to express the divine image it has always carried. The soul is the eternal part of you, the invisible, immortal core that existed before time and will outlive every temporary form. But in the descent into the material world, the soul becomes clothed in layers, beliefs, wounds, habits, attachments. These layers become the old self, the self you think you are, shaped by years of identification with the world. This false self becomes the greatest barrier to loving God because it is rooted in separation and survival, not in divine union. To be reborn into love, the false self must die, the ego must surrender. The mind must be renewed, the soul must be purified, not by ritual but by realization. You do not purify yourself through effort but by light, by seeing clearly. When you recognize the lie of the old self, you are already free. The illusion loses power the moment you stop believing in it, and when the old self fades, the soul begins to shine with the glory of its source. The death of the old self is not destruction, it is liberation. You do not lose anything real, you lose only what was never true. You lose fear, you lose bitterness, you lose limitation, you lose shame, and what remains is truth, love, peace, and power. The soul is not fragile. It is not broken, it is divine, it is untainted, but it must be uncovered, and to uncover it, you must let go of who you thought you had to be. This process is not always comfortable. It can feel like loss. It can feel like confusion. The old self will resist. It will plead to be preserved. It will say, but this is who I am, this is how I survive, this is what I know. But the soul hears a higher voice. It feels the call to come up higher, to shed the garments of illusion, to step into the fullness of its divine identity. And when you respond to that call, when you choose to die to the old, you are loving God with all your soul. Wholehearted devotion is not half-measured, it is not convenient, it does not wait for the perfect conditions. It requires the soul to step into the fire of truth and be willing to let everything false be burned away. What remains is gold. What remains is love that cannot be shaken. What remains is a soul set ablaze with divine life. To love God with all your soul is to say, I no longer belong to fear. I no longer belong to the patterns of my past. I no longer belong to my wounds, to my ego, to my false identity. I belong to the Spirit. I belong to the truth. I belong to the I am. That declaration is not just words. It is a vibration that reshapes your reality. The soul begins to walk in dominion when it is no longer divided. There is a moment in every spiritual journey where one must choose. You cannot carry the old life into the new. You cannot bring the garments of Egypt into the promised land. You cannot love God with all your soul and still cling to bitterness, unforgiveness, or limitation. You must choose which world you will dwell in, the world of form or the world of truth. One is temporary, the other is eternal. One is illusion, the other is divine reality, and yet many try to keep both. They say, I love God, but hold tightly to their pain. They say, I surrender, but keep one hand on the past. They say, your will be done, but only if it aligns with their own. This is not devotion, it is deception. True love is whole, true surrender is total. True devotion is not partial, it is a giving up of the entire self into the hands of the unseen, trusting that what rises from that surrender will be far more glorious than what was given up. What rises is the new self, the divine man, the awakened woman, the soul no longer bound by illusion. This new self thinks differently, speaks differently, moves differently. It does not live by the opinions of man, but by the voice of God. It does not react to fear, but flows in peace. It does not seek approval because it knows it is already accepted. It does not beg for love because it is love in form. This is the soul fully given over to God. This is what it means to love Him with all that you are. This kind of love is not static. It is dynamic. It changes you daily. It causes you to evaluate your thoughts, your words, your decisions. You begin to ask, is this aligned with the truth of who I am in God? If not, you let it go. You forgive quickly, you bless freely, you speak boldly, you rest deeply. You live from a place of fullness because your soul is no longer searching. It has been found. To love God with all your soul is to stop negotiating with fear. It is to stop entertaining doubt. It is to rise each day and say, today I choose the higher path. Today I choose to believe what God believes about me. Today I choose to walk in the Spirit, not the flesh. This is not performance, it is posture. It is not perfection, it is persistence. It is a moment by moment alignment of the soul with its source. You will know when the old self has died, not because you no longer face trials, but because trials no longer define you. You will walk through fire and not be burned. You will face storms and remain at peace. You will lose what others call valuable, and yet feel more rich than ever. Why? Because your soul has found its anchor. You are no longer tossed by the winds of circumstance. You are rooted in the eternal, and this is the fruit of wholehearted devotion. A soul that no longer hungers, for it has tasted the divine. A soul that no longer strives, for it has found rest. A soul that no longer fears, for it has become love. This soul becomes a vessel through which the power of God flows into the world. It touches others not by effort, but by presence. It heals not by striving, but by simply being. Let it be known, to love God with all your soul is to become who you were always meant to be. It is not the beginning of religious activity, but the end of separation. It is not a life of outward appearances, but inward authenticity. It is not a duty, it is destiny. So do not fear the death of the old self. Do not mourn what you were never meant to carry. Do not resist the call to come up higher. Say yes, lay it down, let it burn. And watch what rises from the ashes. It will not be who you were, it will be who you are. In Him, through Him, as Him. This is wholehearted devotion. This is love with no reservation. This is the soul on fire with divine purpose. This is the life that changes the world, not through might or fame, but through the silent, radiant power of one who has become one with God. Strength made perfect, loving God with every action and effort, approximately 1,200 words in paragraphs, written in the style of Neville Goddard without mentioning him. To love God with all your strength is not merely about physical exertion or outward labor. It is not about how loudly you sing, how long you serve, or how intensely you strive. It is about a total consecration of your being, body, will, effort, and energy unto divine purpose. It is about making every act, every breath, every step an offering of love. It is not what you do, but the spirit in which you do it. When the motive is love, the mundane becomes sacred. When the intention is pure, the smallest deed is magnified by divine power. Strength, in this spiritual sense, is not just force. It is focused will. It is the unwavering resolve to walk in alignment with truth, no matter the opposition. To love God with all your strength is to live with integrity when no one is watching. It is to persist in faith when no evidence yet appears. It is to rise when your flesh is weak and declare, "Not my will, but yours be done." This is the strength that heaven honors. This is the kind of strength that transforms a life. But before you can love God with all your strength, you must understand what strength really is. The world teaches that strength is found in dominance, success, image, and control. But divine strength is measured by surrender, resilience, and silent faith. True strength is not proven in the absence of trials, but in how you move through them. It is not proven by what you lift in the gym, but what you carry in the spirit. The strongest are not those who appear mighty, but those who endure quietly with their eyes fixed on the unseen. Every action, however small, is either aligned with God or opposed to Him. There is no neutral ground. Every effort is either energized by fear or animated by faith. To love God with all your strength means that even your labor, even your daily routine, becomes holy. Washing dishes becomes an act of worship. Showing up for work with integrity becomes a spiritual discipline. Raising children, driving, speaking, building, creating, when done in conscious alignment with the divine, become channels of love. Your strength is not just for survival. It is not just for achieving personal goals. It is to be given back to the one who gave it. You were not created to burn out in self-effort or to strive endlessly for validation. You were created to walk in grace, to allow divine life to animate your body and actions. When you do this, your strength becomes supernatural. What once took everything from you now flows effortlessly. Why? Because it is no longer you who lives, but the divine in you. To love God with all your strength is to steward your energy well. It is to say no to the things that drain your soul and yes to what fuels your spirit. It is to be deliberate in where you focus, how you speak, and what you give your time to. You no longer scatter your strength chasing things that don't matter. You are no longer driven by impulse, but led by intention. This is mastery. This is power. This is what it means to walk in divine strength. The body, too, plays a role in this devotion. It is the temple, not the master. When you treat your body as sacred, when you nourish it, rest it, and use it rightly, you are honoring God with your strength. This does not mean worshipping the body or becoming obsessed with appearance. It means recognizing that your body is a vessel for divine expression. Through it, love is extended, service is rendered, and purpose is fulfilled. There are moments in life when loving God with your strength looks like pushing forward. Other times it looks like resting in Him. Divine strength is not always about movement. It is also about knowing when to be still. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is wait. Sometimes the greatest power is in refusing to react. Sometimes the highest act of love is not striving, but trusting. You must discern the season, when to act, when to yield, when to speak, and when to be silent. Strength is not force, it is alignment. Even the seemingly insignificant moments are opportunities for devotion. The way you respond to a rude comment, the way you treat a stranger, the way you work when no one is watching, these are acts of love when done in truth. Nothing is wasted. There is no divide between sacred and secular when your whole life is an offering. To love God with all your strength is to remove that false separation and live in seamless union between the divine and the daily. This love transforms your work. No longer do you perform for recognition or reward. You do all things as unto the unseen, knowing that every act done in love echoes in eternity. You become diligent not because you're trying to earn approval, but because you've already received it. You work with excellence because you represent divine excellence. You give your best not out of fear, but out of love. This is the essence of divine strength. It is joyful, not burdensome. There is also strength in how you speak. Your words carry the vibration of your soul. To love God with your strength means you speak life, not death. You speak faith, not fear. You speak from your spirit, not your wounds. You do not use your tongue to complain, criticize, or curse. You use it to uplift, declare, bless, and create. This discipline is not weakness. It is tremendous strength, for only the strong can control the fire of the tongue. When you walk in this kind of strength, others will notice. They may not understand it, but they will feel it. There is a quiet authority that flows from a soul surrendered in love. You no longer strive to be seen. You become a light. You no longer chase opportunity. Your presence attracts what is aligned. This is not pride. It is the power of a life in union with God. It is the fruit of strength made perfect through surrender. Even in suffering, this strength remains. When pain comes, you do not collapse. When loss strikes, you do not curse. When doors close, you do not fear. Why? Because your strength is not of this world. It comes from a deeper place. It is sourced from the I am within you. You are not shaken because your foundation is eternal. You may feel the wind, but you do not fall. This is the kind of life that honors God not just in praise, but in perseverance. Loving God with all your strength also means refusing to waste your power on things that weaken your spirit. Bitterness, gossip, jealousy, distraction, these sap your strength. You cannot give your energy to drama and still walk in divine power. You must guard your gates. What you see, hear, say, and do, everything affects your energy. Everything either brings you into deeper alignment or pulls you away. Be ruthless in protecting your strength, not out of fear, but out of devotion. You were not called to live a half life. You were not designed to barely get by. You were made to thrive, to radiate, to live fully awake in divine strength. But this can only happen when your will, body, and actions are surrendered to love. This is not legalism, it is liberation. It is not a burden, it is the path to the highest joy. When your life becomes a continual yes to God in every action, you begin to experience a peace and power the world cannot replicate. So today, let your strength be a song of love. Let your hands serve with joy, let your words build, let your eyes see with compassion. Let your body move with grace. Let your energy be used not for anxiety, but for assignment. Love Him with every breath, every step, every effort. not because you are forced to, but because your heart overflows with the desire to. That is true strength, that is love in motion, and when you feel weak, when the road is long and your flesh falters, remember this: His strength is made perfect in your weakness. Divine energy does not require your perfection, only your permission. When you surrender, you are strengthened. When you trust, you are carried. When you give Him your weakness, He gives you His power. This is the great exchange. This is the mystery of love. This is the life you were made for. The reward of love oneness with the Divine Presence, approximately 1,200 words, written in paragraphs in the style of Neville Goddard without mentioning him. The reward of loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength is not riches, accolades, or comfort. It is union. It is the restoration of what was always yours, the oneness with the Divine Presence that spoke you into existence. It is the realization that you and the one you seek were never truly separate. The journey of love is not one of pursuit, but of awakening, awakening to the truth that God is not afar off, but closer than breath, nearer than thought. The highest reward is not something you receive, it is someone you become. When you love God completely, you begin to see life through the eyes of oneness. You no longer see Him as distant, hidden behind the veil of the heavens. Instead, you recognize Him in everything, in the laughter of children, in the silence of night, in the pain that taught you, in the joy that healed you. You begin to understand that you were never alone, that every heartbeat was the echo of divine love beating through you. The reward is not a future event, it is a present unveiling. This love transforms your consciousness. You begin to think from the place of union rather than separation. You no longer say, "God, help me," as if He is out there. You say, "I am," because you realize His nature is your nature, His presence is your power, His essence is your life. This is not arrogance. It is the deepest humility, to know that you of yourself are nothing, but that the eternal I Am has chosen to dwell in you as you. The branch bears fruit only because it abides in the vine, so you bear fruit, not by effort, but by union. Oneness is not theory, it is the lived experience of love realized. It means you no longer live for God as an external deity, but live from God as your very life. Every moment becomes sacred, every breath becomes communion. You don't have to wait for Sunday or find a temple. You have become the temple, you carry the presence within. The veil has been torn, the old separation has been dissolved. You now live from the place of divine presence, not merely toward it. And in this place of union, you begin to walk in a new power, not a power that crushes, but a power that heals, not a power that dominates, but one that liberates. You no longer strive to manifest things to prove something to yourself or others. You rest in the knowledge that all things are already yours. Your desires are no longer driven by emptiness, but inspired by love. You ask not as a beggar, but as a beloved. You create not from need, but from abundance. This is the inner reward, peace that cannot be disturbed, joy that does not fade, confidence that cannot be shaken. You no longer chase love because you have become love. You no longer fear lack because you know your source. You no longer panic when life changes because you are anchored in the changeless. The storms may come, but you dwell above them. Not in denial, but in dominion. The ultimate proof of divine union is not in what you say, but how you live. You begin to reflect the nature of God without trying. You forgive easily because love flows freely. You respond to conflict with calm because peace governs you. You bless when others curse because you've been set free from reaction. This isn't performance, it's the overflow of a soul that has returned to its origin. You have become one with the flame, so you cannot help but shine. This oneness also redefines your identity. You no longer define yourself by history, status, race, or roles. Those things are temporary garments. Your true identity is spirit, eternal, whole, divine. You are not becoming someone better. You are remembering who you've always been beneath the illusions. The fall was forgetfulness. Redemption is remembrance. And the reward of love is that full remembrance returns. To dwell in oneness is to live in alignment. There is no longer a war within. The heart, soul, mind, and strength flow as one. The fragments of your being are gathered into wholeness. You no longer pray for balance. You become balance. Your desires are no longer divided. You want what God wants because His will and your will have become the same. You move not out of fear of judgment, but out of joy in union. This is the secret place where fear dies and love reigns, where doubt melts and vision returns, where the past no longer controls and the future no longer frightens. You abide in the eternal now, where all things are held together by love. It is from this center that miracles happen, not because you chase them, but because they naturally flow from one who abides in truth. The reward of love is also relational. You begin to see others not as separate individuals, but as extensions of the same divine essence. The illusion of them and me dissolves. You recognize the face of God in your neighbor. You no longer love people because you're commanded to, but because you can't help it. You love because you see rightly. This is not toleration, it's revelation, and in this seeing judgment disappears and compassion flows. You stop trying to fix others and begin to bless them. You stop competing and start celebrating. You stop isolating and start including. You no longer ask, "Who is my neighbor?" because you realize everyone is. This love breaks barriers, it reconciles enemies, it heals wounds, it builds bridges where there were once walls. This is not idealism, it is the outworking of oneness realized. You become a presence of peace in a world of chaos, a light in the shadows, a voice of clarity in the noise, not because you try, but because you are. You carry the fragrance of heaven, you embody the tone of truth, you radiate the frequency of love. You don't have to announce it. Your life becomes the message. This is the natural result of loving God with all that you are. You become all that He is. And yes, the external world may still bring challenges. Pain may come, delay may test you, people may misunderstand you, but you no longer live from the outside in, you live from the inside out. Circumstances don't control your state. Your inner union does. You hold the posture of peace in every season. You rest in the knowledge that God in you is greater than all that is against you. This is the reward, divine perspective, divine presence, divine participation in the unfolding of life. You co-create with love, you move in sync with divine timing, you no longer try to force outcomes, you trust the unfolding, you know that all things are working together for good, not because it's a comforting idea, but because you have seen the pattern of love in everything. And perhaps the greatest reward of all is the simplicity that comes. No more striving to be worthy, no more performance to earn approval, no more grasping for validation. You live free, you live light. You live loved, the complexity of religion fades and the purity of relationship remains. You walk with God not because you have to, but because you want to. You love Him not to get something, but because you've already received everything that matters, His presence. So this is the end and the beginning, the summit and the starting point. To love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength is not just a command. It is an invitation into the greatest reality you could ever know, union. And in that union you find everything your soul has ever longed for, not in the future, not in another place, but here, now, within. Let that be your reward, not the things that perish, but the treasure that endures. Not the gifts of the divine, but the giver Himself. You are not just called to serve God, but to abide in Him. You are not merely a believer, you are a beloved, and in the fullness of love returned, you shall discover that what you were seeking was always seeking you.